It's the Rumble. This is Skip Leonard, proudly reporting for Revenue City's ABS. This is gonna be a day to remember. It's the Rumble. 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 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Go, go, go! It's the Rumble. It's the Rumble. It's the Rumble. It's the Rumble. You can see the beautiful city from one side of the boat and the open sea on the other. I don't know about you, but that wild blue horizon calls to me sometimes. But I can't go. There's too much action and excitement right here at home. It's the Rumble. This is a pre-show sound check. If you can hear the sound of my amazing voice, sound off with a yeah!
Hey, what's up, everyone? Hope that pre-show sound checked sound good. What's up? I'm Keenan, or Keyman45, your community manager, the dude that talks and hangs out with you all day and shares your thoughts, feelings, everything with the development team. Today, I have a few new faces to the Rumbleverse dev stream. Mike, Joe, and Marina, members of our UX team. Not all of them, but they'll share more about that shortly. So really quick, I'm just going to pass it around the room for all of our introductions. First up, Mike.
Hey, my name is Mike Rossi. I am the UI UX lead for Rumbleverse.
Cool. On to Joe.
Hey, I'm Joe, Joe Palmer. I'm the UI engineering lead for Rumbleverse.
Cool. And then on to Marina.
Hello, my name is Marina Suarez, and I'm the lead UI artist for Rumbleverse.
Sweet. Thanks for stopping by and hanging out today. As a reminder, this stream is being hosted to showcase the behind-the-scenes development process for Rumbleverse. So please keep questions and comments related to what we're talking about today. Thanks for the respect there. So first up, we've got a presentation. Shout out to this team for putting it together. I'm going to transition now. Cool. A quick little PowerPoint because we all love those, right? First up, what is UI UX? I'm going to ask Mike first.
Yeah, so UI UX stands for user interface and user experience, and it's the combination of the visual feedback the player gets from the game, the user interface, and trying to understand how the player understands and interacts with those elements. So, for instance, the UI is something like the stamina bar, and the UX part of that is evaluating if the player understands features of the stamina bar, like the current stamina amount resulting in you being in a winded state. So that's kind of the super high level of it.
Cool. We'll definitely dive more into that very shortly. So first up, Let's talk about the front end. First up, what is the front end, Mike? And then let's look at some images with that.
Yeah, so this has we refer to this to a few different things. This can be the front end, this can be the landing page, this can be the main menu. This is basically like what is the first thing the player sees after they sign in.
Cool. Wow, look at that. How different is that from what you guys normally see every day, huh?
Yeah, so this is an early mock one of our UI artists did of like what we wanted to kind of aim for with the front end main menu there. And so we, we'll, do wireframes and art mocks to kind of establish like here's some goals before we start implementing or fleshing out the actual functionality of it. Like we'll have defined like, oh, these are the goals of what we want to have. So we wanted, to have the player. We wanted to display the player. We wanted to display their teammates. We wanted to be able to let the player choose their modes and also, let them know about their battle pass and also give them a place to access the things like the locker room in the store and other elements.
For sure. And then I'm seeing some comments of, oh, I love it. Just wait. There's so many iterations that you'll see that the UI UX team worked on, and you'll be surprised at like how many different passes sometimes it takes to get it right to the final version we want to see in game. Let's look at some other images.
Yeah, so this is a screenshot from early on where we actually one of our initial implementations. So you can see some of the goals here of like we have our tab menu up at the top to access. We've got some, allowing you to play. We've got the current Rumbler displaying on screen with their outfit, and some little things here and there as well.
Yeah. This one looks a little bit more recent or closer to, we're inching towards closer to what we were launching with.
Yeah, so this is again another iteration. We're starting to get a bit more art added in there. Things are starting to look a little bit better spaced out, getting to have a little bit more functional states to them and information going on. And actually, I think at this point we're finally pulling from like some live server data for things like the notices and like the fan mail and player level.
Yeah. And this should all look familiar to everyone.
Yeah.
Any comments on how we ended up here?
Yeah, so this is still pretty, like, there's still a couple little things here, but it's like once we've kind of locked in the elements that we knew, we just kind of then took it of like, how do we refine the art and make it look as best as we can? And how do we ensure that, like, the actual statuses of, like, this is a challenge in progress, or like how far it is, or like letting the player know that they have fan mail to claim and all that sort of thing. And, or the current, make sure we're showcasing, like, that this is the current game mode that you've selected that sort of stuff. And then it's not as visible in here since it's a static image, but we're also there's at this point there would have also been a lot more dynamic visuals, so things moving around, effects going on as well.
I imagine it's very tricky having so much information to communicate, but making sure it's pretty visible to the player.
It is tricky, but it's definitely like I personally love this stuff because it's like we are we're the we're that literal interface layer between the player and the game, and that's what's really exciting about this.
Yeah. On to our battle pass. I'm gonna pass it to Marina.
Battle Pass screen is a wonderful screen, and actually it's very important for us as a live service type of game, just because this is where the player sees constant progression in between matches, and this is like the place that every time there's a new season coming in, this screen is the place to check out as soon as you can, just to see what kind of cool and exciting new cosmetics you can be unlocking next in this new season. If we move on to like the following images, we'll see how far has come, the Battle Pass screen to a very let's say, primal stage where you have just the character, how to buy the tiers, and whatnot, to something that is a little more polished and more, clear to the player. it was kind of tricky to find also like different color states, kind of what Mike was introducing earlier in the landing page, defining different types of colors and what are the tiers that are in progress versus the tiers that haven't been unlocked just yet, and tiers that are like, how does it look like when you have unlocked the battle pass versus how does it look like when you haven't, purchased the battle pass just yet. And I don't know. I think it's a wonderful progression to see because it's one of the screens that went through a lot of iterations. That's for sure.
Definitely. You can see it here, how different it landed in the game, and then how different it is in this image, and
Hmm.
probably a lot of experimentation too of like what is actually within the battle pass, and how are we then going to highlight those items or distinguish them differently from what we see throughout the pass, because we want to make it enticing for everyone.
Yeah, another thing that is cool to see, especially in this last one, is we're trying to unify like the rarity tiers and the rarity colors that we have assigned. Those being like the green for rare, like sorry, the green for uncommon, the blue for rare, and epic and legendary. So it took us a while to just kind of figure out the best way of defining like a palette for good communication, just to make excited the players to see like, oh, I just unlocked the epic thing, and the epic thing is a cool like title card background that is very flashy, or something completely different that is a little more cosmetic. So it took us a lot back and forth, but unifying colors was a key component of this screen as well.
For sure. I know I definitely, especially in the first battle pass, I was so excited for the orange mustache, which I see on the screen here.
It's so
Unlocking
good.
those epic items were pretty cool. On to our locker room. We're going to pass it to Joe here.
Yeah, the locker room is a behemoth. It encompasses so much stuff you can do in terms of dressing up and customizing your character. Um, we started working on this in terms of like the UI of the game. This was like one of the first things we started trying to put together because it's just so massive, and it was going to be so important to people being able to customize their characters and really express themselves in the game. Like expression was always one of the main tenets of the game, and so we had to kind of get this right. And we started really early. So yeah, let's go to the next one.
Uh,
As you can see, this is like extremely like early stuff. Like all gray boxes, really just getting the functionality of the screen together. What do we want to be able to do in this screen? How do we want to organize our information? Um, how much should we put on the screen at one time? All that stuff is like, this is like the bare bones basics. You can see there's barely any art involved. There's barely any environment involved. You can't even really make the character yet. Like the character there is like not even, he doesn't even have skin. So,
right. Like,
um,
how do you even like first approach like, all right, what am I going to do for my first draft?
I mean, you typically would start off with a design. Like we start with a design. We might go to a wireframe after that, and then we start breaking it down into like little pieces. Like, what does this screen need to do, and what is the tech? What is the design elements? What are the design elements that we need to figure out and create in order to make that screen go? So like that tab bar at the top is one piece of UI, and the grid is another piece of UI. That scroll bar that does something completely different. Like everything is a little piece that goes into the whole. And so you start with a design, you break that design down into pieces, and you start trying to build the pieces and put them together.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, let's go to the next one. So yeah, so you can see like we started. You can see that environment shaping up. You can see the characters actually dressed up. They're
Mhm.
actually like wearing the things that you selected. But this locker room is like completely different than what y'all see now, right? So we're still iterating. We're still trying to like figure out the right way to present all the information to you. Um, we spent a lot of time with this one though. Like we spent a lot of time on this particular iteration of the locker room, um, and kind of brings back some good memories.
Yeah, for sure. I think something that's kind of cool too, as everyone's watching here, like you could see like certain items that we all still wear today, how long they've like kind of been in the system of the game, uh, and then obviously seeing the improvement in progress and growth of cosmetics that have shown up in the game over time. But we still all have our classic favorites like a squat shirt or a don't skip leg day, which is cool.
Yeah, I was always one to wear the shirt and tie with the rolled up sleeves because I was getting down to business.
My first favorite shirt when I first started on the project was the bacon and egg shirt. It's just like a classic. Cool. All right, and another step
So
forward.
I think there's a Derek has a question from chat.
Oh, okay.
Hmm.
What's that question? Let's
It
see.
says once you figure out how to handle how to make the UI do something, equip an item, for example, do you have to rebuild that whole thing if the UI then changes, or can you reuse functions you made initially?
I'll leave it to you all.
I mean, there's a lot of reuse amongst a single screen, across screens. Like once you figure out like kind of a pattern for doing something, whether that be in code or scripting, you can reuse that stuff and apply it to different elements. So like the code that I write to change the body type can be used to change the different shirts. It's just a matter of like what information do I pass to that particular function? Like do I pass it a shirt? Do I pass it a body? Kind of internally, we know how to look at what we're trying to change and then apply the changes properly for that type of item. So some of it crosses over and some of it you end up having to like do some new stuff. It's a mix.
Cool. Thanks for the answer. I'm also seeing a couple other questions we aren't able to reach out to just yet. Friendly reminder: the purpose of this stream is to like highlight and showcase like all the hard work the Iron Galaxy dev team has put in the game, and like acknowledge and appreciate all the like different iterations the game has gone through to what it currently is today. So try to keep the chat focused on that if you can, please. Thank you very much. Move on to the next still.
Yeah, so this is like the final version, right? This is like I took this screenshot in the game yesterday. And you can see like instead of being just on a grid with a crap ton of items to select, we kind of separated it out into different sections. So you can do your presets in one place, you can do your body, you can do your costume in another place. Emotes got their own screen, and there's some stuff you can equip from this screen as well. Typically, it's just the newest stuff that you've gotten from like fan mail, you purchase from the store. So um, we like changed our approach to using the locker room so that the stuff that we you wanted to get to quickest was most easily available to you. So it's like right there as soon as you go into the locker room, and you may not have to go into one of those bigger screens. You may just be able to do what you need to do from here, and then just get into your matches.
For sure, especially if you've finished all your fan mail, all of your battle pass and season 2, and it's like I have so many items, it's almost
Hmm.
overwhelming how much cool stuff I've unlocked, and it's like, well, I know I just got the dog head, so
I mean, that's what the advanced locker room is for, right? You
right,
turn that on, and then it kind of calms everything down.
yeah, definitely. For the folks who haven't maybe discovered that just yet, hit your settings, check out the advanced locker room functionality. It sets you up quite nicely. Cool. Next up, the store. We're gonna continue on with Joe.
This is, kind of the screen where we kind of present you a lot of the work that the character team is doing, the accessory teams are doing to make new outfits, make new pieces for you to dress up. A lot of this screen has to do with presenting you things that you might be interested in, kind of directing you to other features in the game. So like the battle pass, if you need some brawler bills, making it easy for you to get those. Um, and this is actually one of the more complex screens in the game, just because of all the uh, like the store tech. Like there's all kinds of stuff that goes into like presenting things to buy in a game. And so it looks pretty simple with just some tiles, and you click the tiles and you go and you buy, but it's actually really complex under the hood. Um, so yeah, let's get into it.
And check that
Yeah,
out.
yeah.
We're a ways away from how the store or shop previously looked, huh?
I mean, it's pretty. It looks worse than it actually is. Like it looks further away than I think it actually is. And we talked about this earlier when we were looking at these slides.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you can see the structure of the current store right there.
Yeah.
Like you can see the tabs, you can see the tiles, you can see the module names, you can see the timer, you can see the rarity,
Mm-hmm.
you can see the name. Everything is really there. Um, the question is like, you know, how can we make this look better? How can we make it look more enticing? How can we make it look, easier to kind of cycle through and navigate? And that's all stuff that like art is like super helpful with. Design is like extremely helpful with like looking at this screen and going like, okay, it's functional, but like, how can we make it better?
Right. All right. So it's
Instantly
looking,
better.
yeah, more familiar. The colors are giving a lot of information.
Yeah. I'm not gonna linger on this one too long. You can just see like, hey, we kind of put something together art wise, and then we're gonna see the next evolution of this art in the next slide.
Yeah.
So this is what the store kind of ended up looking like. And um, I don't know, Mike, do you want to talk about some of the stuff we did from a design perspective to like improve the store generally from just like a few tiles to like making it look more fuller and things of that nature?
Yeah, we know that there was a lot of community feedback about, oh, it didn't feel like there was much in the store, and it's like, yeah, but there is. It's just not being presented. So some of the things we changed, I think it was it the mid-season one patch or the mid-season two patch? I can't remember exactly. We took a pass at this at trying to reduce some of the white space, trying to reduce also giving a little bit of you can see on the edges on the right and left, giving you a peek into the other modules and to show you that there's other stuff going on that you
Mm-hmm.
might want to take a look at. And then we also can't see it in here, but we also added some dynamic elements to these tiles as well to just to give it a little bit more. Flavor and eye catchiness to go in and especially make these like the bundles look a bit more appealing.
Yeah, I think something else probably to highlight within this too is like here on the screen we see like the dinosaur set, and but after you click that, within that you see all the different elements within that too. So it's there's even more, I guess you could say, hidden information within like certain sets if you were to click into them. Got another chat or question from the chat. Thanks, Derek. Um, Was there going to be any UI changes in the future for certain places, items? If so, are we able to see? I'm not sure we can answer fully there, but you could assume this like um, moving forward or for the future, right? We are gonna work. How we worked on the game was to always iterate and improve. So in the future, if that becomes an option down the line, that information would then be communicated at that time because we want to save it all for you in the future if we reach there. Yeah. Cool. Moving on to UI color usage. We're gonna pass it to Marina here.
Oh, color usage, the favorite, like the artist favorite topic ever. I would say that color usage in Rumbleverse UI is very clever. And I would say that the most important part, or at least one of the things that our UI art team focuses the most, was of how to successfully apply the color theory to our UI navigation. This is key, just because in this case, at least for Rumbleverse main palette, if we go to the next image, we might be able to see like the way we build the overall main palette of the entire UI. And in the next slide, there's like a definition that we established kind of very early on when we were like trying to dress up and skin all the screens, that we have a dominant palette that it has this beautiful shade of purples. But then we have this secondary palette that help us to highlight and accent certain things in the UI that we want you to see. Like in this case, we decide to define the shade of secondary colors as a highlight state for buttons and menus. What this means is that whatever the player is focusing or selecting, you will notice a yellow accent. And that kind of touches a little bit with the stuff that Mike was talking about earlier when we were trying to define that animation, that I guess interaction the player with menus. It will look yellow and you will know exactly where you are right now in the UI. And I think as we can go through the next two images, just so you can have an example of how all the art was defining the way all the different states look. In this case, this is for Battle Pass, so you will see how a completed tier looks like when it's has been purchased versus when it's free versus hasn't been purchased. Same goes for like how does this tier look like when it's in progress in these three different states, which is like purchase, not purchase, and then like free. And same applies for tiers that you haven't unlocked yet.
Yeah, there's so much information that's being communicated just like on one item alone, depending on like the status of it. So it's pretty complex to see all the different versions, even just within the one item.
Exactly, and I think this kind of thing, theory or logic, it comes from our style guide, where we do this conscious effort in most parts of the front end screens, just because this is kind of the same logic we apply for title card assets, same logic we apply for like some locker room assets as well. So it's kind of our way to standardize to the player the way you should be interacting with your game, and that makes it easier while trying to be in style with the game.
Definitely. One more slide.
Yes. And you will see a little bit of this kind of idea applied to like the rarity color palette that we have, but also how our rarity color palette also influences like the way that we created title card assets. Um, we we did the conscious effort of making sure that common title cards are super cool. They look flashy, but they are not nearly as flashy as the epic ones, right? The more you grind in your battle pass, the farther you get, and the more epic title cards you will get eventually. And so that is also baked. That idea is so baked in the art, where you have like super flashy like epic title card that will tell it will be brighter, it will be a little more saturated, and it will be definitely a great presentation for your Rambler final title card when you defeat some people.
Yeah, no, it's cool. I think how you can like distinguish that rarities with like the colors alone. It like gives the weight and emphasis behind them. So it's cool to like see the palettes and how they are applied in game. Thanks.
Yeah, and another super cool thing that I experienced while working, especially in gameplay side of things in the UI, is like accessibility modes that we have in our game. Like for us, this color theory apply here as well, just because we have been supporting colorblind mode options ever since launch. But to me, it was pretty cool to be able to work, especially on teammate colors, while developing trios and quads modes. Just because more people, more you have a bigger need to have more colors defining where your teammates are in any time, right? And so in this case, the main takeaway here for these palettes that you've been presented is kind of like our first pass on the color for like the first iteration on the left.
Mm-hmm.
It was good for colorblind mode, but like you will notice that it wasn't the best contrast, especially where we're talking about like protanopia type of colorblindness, and especially monochromacy colorblindness. Like there's not a lot of contrast in there, and so like some players are gonna miss out or are not gonna be able to tell who's the teammate, or like won't have that clarity, right? And so it was very nice that as a result of this exploration, we have a final color pass on the right where that address all these issues and brought a lot more contrast to all colorblind modes that we support in the game. And for instance, just make the game more accessible just to rumble in trios and quads.
Definitely. Yeah, it's cool to see that like as more information comes in the game with more players, like the focus on ensuring that the information that the player needs and wants to understand, play their best. There's like a focus there for clarity. It's cool.
Yeah, in this case, it's kind of the same as an idea. Like you will think that colors apply to some places in the hat, but in this case, it was key for us because those colors were going to be in your in every teammate like health bar, in every outline that you see in the renders that are telling you where your friend is. in the name of your friend. And if we go to the next image, we will see that that is also presented in our pin system. When you pin somewhere, whatever your color, teammate color is, your friend will be able to tell almost immediately, okay, this is the person that is pinning this area because of these reasons, and that is presented in game, like in the world, and also in the mini map. So that was a pretty cool exploration to make triggers and quads even more accessible. Like if those game modes are already super fun, like this will help everyone to be able to enjoy it as well.
Especially in like the madness of like quads where there's a dog pile of 20 people, and then you're like,
Exactly.
wait, Marina, I need chicken. Where? Oh, you're the green ping. Cool. I'm gonna head in that direction. Like it makes it much easier in those scenarios, which is helpful.
Exactly. And I think this will be the last bit that we have in a while for UI art. And I thought it was a pretty cool thing to just kind of comment or touch base super quick. And this is basically our iconography process for emotes and perks. And it is important to note that we didn't really want to display a specific body type or gender in our emotes. That's why we have this genetic figure going on. And it was a conscious effort to make it, like as generic as possible. But the best part of this process was analyzing our character animations that our animation team put together, which they did fantastic work.
Yeah.
But also try to pick the right pose and like represent the emote like icon as accurate as possible as you can. And it was a super fun iteration with the art team.
It's nice to see like all the different passes, like potential options it could have been, but then how we landed on what works best for like player communication. It's cool. Cool. And then continuing on with Marina.
Keenan,
What's up?
I think we got another question from the chat. It looks
Another
like,
question. Yeah.
yeah.
What programs were primarily used for the UI assets? Illustrator, Sketch, Figma? Question mark. Who's got the
Um,
answer?
I think I might have the answer.
Okay.
Mainly, although like obviously you can chime in, guys. But at least for the part that was more like UX driven, we use like a little bit of support in Adobe XC. But for the parts that are touching like just the art assets itself, it was Photoshop. Like yeah, CC Photoshop most of the time. Sometimes we will get a little bit of support from Illustrator, but most of the time was Photoshop.
Cool. Thanks for that answer. And I'm going to open up this question, but we're actually going to answer it later because we actually dive into it a little bit. But I'm going to state the question now for everyone to keep it in mind for later. Speaking on colors with the protein pod colors, what's the reason on the colors used for them? Keep that in mind. We'll bring that up later or fairly soon. But continuing on with title cards with Marina.
Sounds good. To me, title cards is a pretty cool thing we have in this game, and very unique in some respect, really, because it's a specific reward that we give to the player to be able to customize their own like presentation, if I may, with like a lot of different cool assets in featuring your favorite cosmetics for your character.
For sure. Before we dive into this this first image under title cards, question I guess kind of for everyone. How important would you say is collaboration, like specifically, with the UI UX team, or maybe just with the whole Rumbleverse dev team in general, and like how close do you get to work together, and how do those efforts together pan out to the end product?
Yeah, I'll jump in first and say that like UI UX is in a really unique position is that we get to see the game as a whole. A lot of teams within the larger dev team tend to focus on certain areas and they might be combat's just focusing on combat, so they might not be able to see like the front end stuff that's going on, whereas like UI we're in a fortunate position like we get to kind of see all of that because we're working
Hmm.
with all of that. And so as a result, it's really important for us to be able to communicate and work with all these respective other groups, because we're ultimately like bringing it together and making and trying to make sure that like the user ultimately can understand all these various systems that are across the project, both in the game, outside of the game, and whatever.
Cool. Anything to add there, Marina or Joe?
In my case, just jump in super quick on it. I would say that this title card screen is a perfect example just to talk about how collaborative our team and our pipeline really is. Because everything will start in like an UX UI design mockup, kind of like establishing the user navigation and kind of the main UI elements. But then engineering will start building the core structure in game, and at the same time, art will be trying to dress up the final screen with final assets and visuals, and even combine a little bit of animation mocks, and everything is kind of like the only thing to note here that is very important for us is like communication is super key while we are like coordinating, kind of chiming in and adding or part of the process. I think Joe may have something more to say more in depth with the engineering part, but communication is obviously super key here.
I mean, in terms of collaboration, the engineering of it is that's kind of like inside baseball. I think you keyed on the right thing, Marina, is that the communication part is um, the most important. Like we start from a design, and a design is a communication from the design department about how they want the screen to work, what they expect it to kind of look like, and then we communicate with design to make sure that their intent is clear and that we don't, you know, do something engineering wise that, kind of goes against what their intent was. Um, we talk to art to make sure that like we can support the things that they want to do visually. So like sometimes we're dealing with a lot of textures, so maybe we need to talk about how we're going to manage that memory, or we need to talk about where those textures will be defined and how we can get access to them from a design perspective and from a programming perspective. So it's like, yeah, there's technical parts that I could talk about, but like the truth of it is like really making sure the communication is flowing at all times, and not being afraid to like get clarity, make sure you really understand um, what it is we are trying to build, because if we do that, then we all end up in the same place and we all kind of get out of it what we want. Um, and I guess the last thing I'll say is like, as an engineer, there's a bit of responsibility in terms of just like um, you are in a way responsible sometimes for how others' work is presented. So like if you don't do your job right, then maybe the audio doesn't come through properly, or the art isn't displayed in a good way, or the design fails because there's some issue with what you've done programming wise. So like that's another thing to take into account, is just like you're kind of responsible to each other, and that makes that communication even more important. So
Yeah, I think something beautiful that's pretty cool that you're highlighting is like how many moving parts there are and how many people rely on each other to get their individual job done because of how much of a team effort it is to get something like Rumbleverse created. That's awesome to highlight. Take a step forward in our title card part of the presentation. Any other further comments here, Marina?
I would say not a lot more comments, just showing the progression in general. The big change between this and what you see in game is we decide to add like the rarity, like every single title card assets rarity, so you can see which ones are like the more epic or unique versus the ones that are like just cool but uncommon. And you will see, I believe in the next image, like what you currently will find in game.
Yeah.
It's brighter and colorful, more colorful in the final result, which is pretty neat.
Yeah. And then on to settings, and we're gonna head back to Joe.
sorry. Yeah, settings are, you know what settings are. You basically go there to change things about the game that we want to give you optionality on. So like we talked about the advanced locker room features that we put in the settings menu, but there's all kinds of stuff in there like, your voice chat settings, your graphic settings on PC, controller bindings, that was a big one. So yeah, let's have a look at this screen. So this is an early version of the screen. This was like one of the first versions. We didn't even have our visual style like locked down yet. You can see it's blue, and that there are these weird splashy backgrounds in the background that don't look anything like what we have now. And next slide. And then we kind of get on the purple train. We're like, purple's our color. We're going to do that. And then there are more tabs we add to the menu. So like more options as the game gets fuller and fuller. We add more optionality into each of these submenus. And then next slide. And then here we are, the final version of the screen. It's got, some good visual style to like make clear what options you're selecting, how many options there are. We put descriptions in, um, a lot of stuff here to kind of make the screen as informative as possible while also being very useful and clear. So
Sure. Yeah. Now, like a follow-up question related, because I know it's not immediately presenting itself, but I know it's very important to the development process. What is localization, and can you tell me more about it?
localization is just basically the process of getting the game translated into multiple languages for multiple cultures. So, if you're playing the game in Japanese or Spanish or French, the process that we go through to make sure all the text is translated and presented properly in those languages is called localization. Um, and it's really important, but it's also really boring to the average person. But if we don't do it right, then you end up with people not being able to, get the most out of the experience, right? So it's one of those things that it's like the vegetables of game development. You have to get that right so that people can experience the game and really have fun with it. So we spent a lot of time, making tools for localization, working with localization partners regularly to get things translated. Uh, and it's a big part of UI UX because, again, like Mike said, we spend a lot of time trying to communicate things about the game to others, and localization is like one of the most important factors. So,
Right, definitely. Thanks for that, Joe. On to the in-game HUD. And before we dive into it, Mike, can you tell us what HUD even stands for, and I guess more about it?
Yeah, so HUD is our go-to term for heads-up display, and so this is basically like what the UI is when you're actually playing the gameplay. So what are those, the health bar, the stamina bar, the special moves you have equipped, that sort of stuff. Yeah, so this is really early shot of the HUD. You can see here we've got the mini map going on, some start of the compass, we've got some start of the player stats, which at the time were named differently. They were arm, core, and legs. We've got the health and stamina bar and the special moves also getting in there, and then some other elements that we didn't make it past these early stages, but yeah, they're in there.
Yeah. So tie back, I'm going to bring back an old question because I know it's going to pop up here. Speaking on colors, when the protein pod colors were selected, what was the reason and why we chose them? And I'll move to the next slide before we jump into that conversation.
Yeah, so here's an updated, another iteration of HUD, and you can see the colors, the player stats have changed a little bit, and yeah, those originally the colors were more just like we needed to have distinct three colors for the elements, and the association in game was a little less straightforward than it is now. Like it wasn't as like direct that like green pod is going to increase your green health, or yellow pod's going to increase your yellow stamina. It was a little bit different, and so as gameplay changed their design of how those pods function, we adapted and tried to change those colors. One, to make sure they differentiated between the three so it was clear which pod was which, but also to help better capture like what element within the game that stat was associated with.
Cool.
Yeah, so this one, this one's a screenshot from another progression that I personally was a big fan of, but I totally get why it didn't work and why we had to change it. But you can see the health and stamina bars look very different from those previous two screenshots, and especially what's in game now.
Mm-hmm.
And this was actually where the progress bars of those like actually moved into the center. And so this was an experimentation of like we knew we knew stamina was really important, and so we wanted to make sure that it was it was especially readable. And so this was an iteration on that, and similar with health. And so, but ultimately we were like, oh, okay, this looks cool, but it doesn't quite work. And you can also see the player stats on are getting another iteration. And then we also had some different input visualization there to let the player know like a little bit more dynamically what actually actions they could perform in a given moment.
Yeah. Was there any different functionality behind? I know it's arms, core, and legs now, but you mentioned with the different colors and different like evolving mechanics of the game. I guess any comments on how I guess pods used to work in the past?
So it's a better question for the gameplay folks, but I do think it was like so the red was like this is your overall damage, legs was your overall speed within the game, and
Mm.
then the yellow, I think it was some combination of both stamina and health. But it also, again, that was one of those things that went through a lot of iterations, and so
Mm-hmm.
my memory's a little fuzzy on on the specifics of what it did over time.
Sure. Cool. Thanks for
Yeah,
that.
that's one of the things we wanted to clarify by the color choices too. So like it wasn't always clear what the pods affected. And like one of the things that we kind of zeroed in on over time was like the green pod should do what the green thing on your screen is connected to, right?
Mm.
So like just drawing those connections between the colors you see on your HUD and then the colors you see in the world and the things you consume.
Interesting.
Um, yeah, I mean, because if somebody has never played the game before, like you want to give them as many breadcrumbs as you can to help them understand like how things work in the world, even without like text bubbles or, a tutorial. Like what can the player understand just based on the visual choices that we make?
Right.
Yeah, so here's just another iteration, and this is probably the most closest to what we actually ended up shipping with. So you can see here the superstar meter. All those iterations up until now didn't have a superstar meter, and now we're starting to add that in. We're gameplay had switched up, did a big switch up on the player stats. Instead of having in the previous ones, you had three distinct like ones you could fill out, whereas now it's like you got 10 and you can fill them up with whatever amount you want.
Hmm.
And so that was a big change. And then so you can also see some moving of things around, some changing of like we still got the compass in there, which we ended up integrating more into the actual mini map itself.
Yeah.
And so yeah,
This is like a cool sneak peek of what the barge used to look like too.
yeah.
That's cool. And before we
Uh,
head to magazines, all right, sorry, do you have something else to add?
no, I think you were going to touch on what I was going to say.
Oh yeah. So one quick question from the chat: was purple determined by user testing or determined by uniqueness of use compared to other games? How was purple landed on as our color?
Yeah, so it's actually more of the latter of that it was like we were trying to figure out a color that, kind of set us apart from other our competitors and other games. And so we ended up landing on purple as both one that, we didn't feel like other games were using or at least not using as like their color. And so we kind of, and we also like there was a lot of like positivity. Like I'm personally like a big fan of purple.
Mm,
Like I think it's underutilized. It's definitely a hard color to work with as a primary color. It's much more used more as accents as well. But I mean, to back to color theory, purple is viewed as a royal color. It's got a lot of importance to it, and so like we took it and we owned it, and I love it.
Very cool. Me too. Cool. And then on to our last topic for the presentation, magazines. And then back to you, Mike.
Yeah, so magazines, that this is also one of those things where like pretty early on we knew that we wanted to support this mechanic of going around the city, picking up a magazine, reading it, and being able to select a special move to equip for your match. And so yeah.
Check that
So yeah,
out.
this is one of the original implementations and mock-ups. I think this is actually an art mock of a potential magazine. And as you can see, there's a lot more information on here than what we ended up with because we were still defining like, you know, what all the details of the magazine were and trying to figure out like, you know, what level of information do we need to expose to the player regarding the special moves. And you can also see we were starting to figure out like we knew we wanted this to be a risk reward type element because, you know, opening these magazines and reading them, it's obscuring a bit of your actual gameplay, so there's a bit of a risk there. And then also you might also notice that there's before right now we just you just have the option to drop a magazine, but we wanted to experiment with like, well, what if instead of dropping it you have the option to take a perk, and so you could also do that instead of uh, equipping a special move.
I see Ramon in the chat now. He said taking a perk was so stupidly OP. I
Yeah,
can only imagine.
Super OP.
yeah, the combination of that and the player stats, the original player stats implementation, like those final rounds, those final rings were pretty vicious in the early days.
Right. Cool. So this is probably another step forward, I imagine.
Yeah, so you can see it's starting to get a little bit closer. We've condensed the amount of information on there, focusing mainly on the imagery and the rarity values. Still got the perk system in there, but yeah.
Yeah. This is
Yeah, and
looking more familiar.
yeah, this is looking way closer to what we actually shipped with. So we got rid of the take a perk, take a random perk, and you know, still keeping it simple, but it's still lacking some of the more details that are in the shipped version. But yeah.
Cool. And that is our presentation. Huge shout out to the folks in this very presentation that curated this presentation. Thanks, everyone. But before we move on to our gameplay, hopefully we have time to play a quick one because I know we got some responsibilities to get to. But are there any other teammates, Joe, Mike, Marina, that you'd like to make a shout out to?
Yeah, there's I mean, the team is huge, so I mean, first of all, shout out to everybody on the team, but specifically, I did want to say thanks to like our producers who like we don't have anybody from production here on this call, but like we've had a number of like really good producers, Jared, Chris, Nicole, Micah, and for me personally, I just want to shout out John Moore, who is our graphics engineer. He's also been heavily involved in our performance, um, and just like he's just a great dude to work with, and he's always been great about like teaching me about the parts of UI that I don't know anything about, particularly performance.
Mm-hmm.
When I started this job, it was like I'd never worked in UI before, so you know we try to stay versatile at IG. So you know I'm doing something new, and he's taught me a shit ton. Oh, excuse me, sorry, a crap ton about just like you know performance, memory management, and that kind of stuff that like I would have known if he hadn't taken the time. So shout out to him.
Shout out to those teammates. Thanks, Marina.
Yeah, I was gonna shout out like the entire team, obviously, but just a quick shout out to a few or for outsourcing teams that help us to pull out some nice looking icons and assets, especially leading to launch. Those are external teams that they work very closely with us for a while, and they don't really get as as many shout outs as they should. So shout out to Game Vision and Pingle for helping us a lot.
Shout out to them. Thanks. And then Mike.
Yeah, so Joe and Marina have already kind of hinted at this, but I specifically want to shout out to all our current and former team members on the UI UX team. Like we we were a team, I think we averaged around like 15 members at any given time throughout this project, and like seriously, we couldn't have done all this work without them. Like it wasn't just the three of us. This was a team effort to get all this stuff in, and they did some awesome work, and I'm really proud of all of them and what we were able to achieve.
Agreed. Well, huge thanks to you three for joining me today, on giving us like an explanation on what UI UX is, and just barely, I'm sure, scratching the top of it, because there's just so much depth to that area of focus for games. Are we still okay time wise? Are you guys free to play a quick game?
Yeah, let's get a couple in.
Cool. All right.